talk about different layer of consciousness, I personally think that we define things as our mind to understand. And for example, I am from science background, so quantum chemistry or quantum physics, there are always also different levels. But is that enough to define things? We always ask that the quantum chemistry is enough to define things. We don't have stories of that. That's why we are trying to find as in science also. So for defining things, you need to have a holistic approach. And the holistic approach for approaching to the truth about consciousness, you cannot define it by entirely physical being or entirely mental state. You need to integrate everything, not only the entirely physical being. It should be combination of both mental and the physical state, and as well as some other dimension also. We have to always include that. So, as a scientist, I did one experiment. It is computer molecular simulation experiment using very high speed computational power, where I was analyzing data, and I put the equation, and in that equation, there are several parameters we have to put, and in all the parameters have different weightage of that. When I did the calculation for that, then normally people believe I will get one structure. I got 4, 5 different structures. So see, if you put the different weightage to different contributions, then you will get something different answer, not the single answer you are looking for. So that's my approach also about the consciousness of whatever I understand from my point of view. So I will end my thing with a sentence that truth cannot define through complete existence. And complete physical truth is also a complex question to discuss and argue, let alone consciousness. So I will end with this one, and then very, very thankful for all the speakers and all the audience who are taking part in this discussion. I am looking forward for this discussion.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Raj. And I would like to invite now our honorable speaker, Dr. Manoj Panda, to give his talk. He is assistant professor in Precedency University. He did his PhD, MPhil from JNU, and he is also my senior there. So please welcome Dr. Manoj Panda, and please begin our discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Shipra. Am I audible?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Raj. Thank you, Dr. Shipra, for giving me this opportunity to discuss about the problem of consciousness, or the problem of explaining phenomenal consciousness. I'm also thankful to all the panelists for taking part in this discussion. Before beginning my talk, let me read a very well-known passage from Francis Crick's book, The Astonishing Hypothesis. I quote, he says, "The astonishing hypothesis is that you, your joys, your sorrows, your memories, and your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. You are nothing but a pack of neurons." Unquote. As you can see here, Francis Crick is trying to propose that our sense of ourselves, the way I make sense of myself, is nothing but the interaction among neurons in my brain. Is it the case? Is it the case that consciousness is nothing but the interaction among neurons? That's what we will try to understand in this lecture in a particular way. Let me first state what I would like to discuss today in my lecture. We will try to understand and highlight one of the most important aspects of consciousness, and that is the phenomenal consciousness, or we can call it the qualitative or subjective aspect of consciousness. As we know, there is so much controversy about the very nature of phenomenal consciousness that, almost all the debates and theories in consciousness studies directly or indirectly deal with this particular aspect of consciousness. To begin with, one can say that it is the inability to reduce phenomenal consciousness. It is the irreducibility of phenomenal consciousness that is at the heart of all the debates, and that is at the heart of mystery of consciousness. Consciousness remains a mystery because till today we have not been sufficiently able to unpack the phrase, quote and unquote, what it is like to be conscious, what it is like for a subject to be conscious. As we all know, the subject matter of consciousness in its different shades has been fundamental to many pursuits of knowledge. People from different disciplines are trying to understand what is it for which we are aware of the world, what is it for which we engage with people in this world. Various philosophers throughout the ages, as we know, they have been trying to understand consciousness in different ways. Consciousness, as we are aware, lies at the heart of mind-world relationship. We try to make sense of ourselves. We try to engage with the world. We try to be aware of our surrounding because of consciousness. And consciousness is something, as we know, which makes the problem of this relationship, the relationship between mind and body, a difficult problem to solve. Because consciousness is such a characteristic or such a property of mind without which minds would not be seen as radically opposed to the body the way it is seen by many philosophers. We are in this context reminded of the famous René Descartes, who made a radical distinction between mind and body. So there would hardly be any difference between mind and body without the existence of consciousness. Our conscious experiences are, of course, regarded as very significant phenomena of our life, because it is through conscious experience, it is through conscious awareness we engage with the world, we make sense of the world, we engage with people or state of affairs in the external world. So conscious experience, one can say, contributes significantly to our life. Without having conscious experience, without being aware of the world, without being self-aware, life loses its very meaning. One can say that our conception, our understanding of life would be very different if it were not a conscious life. So along with all other discoveries, along with various scientific inventions, solving the mystery of life to a certain extent significantly depends on solving or explaining the mystery of consciousness. As
Recording stopped.
There are various ways philosophers have tried to explain consciousness.
Recording in progress.
There are various ways. There is some noise.
Is it okay now?
There was some background noise.
Yeah. Is it okay now? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay for me, but there was noise. Okay, so philosophers have explained consciousness by identifying different properties or different characteristics, whether it is in relation to brain or our body or our external world or to consciousness itself. I mean, there are various properties or there are various characteristics in terms of which philosophers have tried to explain consciousness. In contemporary philosophy of mind, one may say that philosophical discussion on consciousness has taken broadly two trajectories. Some philosophers discuss consciousness as consciousness of something or some state of affairs. On the contrary, one can say that some philosophers take consciousness as in itself. We know the famous theory of intentionality from Franz Brentano and Edmund Husserl. For Brentano, intentionality is the mark of the mental. That means mental phenomena or conscious states are always consciousness of something, or our mental states are always directed towards something, or it is about something. So this aboutness or this directedness constitutes the essence of consciousness. This aboutness character is one of the important characteristics of consciousness. We can call it the representational nature of consciousness, and the representational nature of consciousness is in fact understood in terms of its directedness or aboutness. For Brentano, as I said, intentionality is the mark of the mental, and he used this criteria to distinguish between conscious states and physical states. And it is one of the characteristics which tells us that
recording stopped.
Consciousness represents. Consciousness is always representational in nature. But I am not going to the details of this particular characteristics in this lecture. Rather, my focus is on phenomenal consciousness. There is another aspect of consciousness according to which consciousness is not always consciousness of something. Then what is it? In this context, consciousness is understood as an intrinsic or internal property of experience. I mean, this property, which is attached to our experience, is due to the subjective features of our experience as such. I mean, we have experience only due to this subjective feature. Otherwise, we won't be having any experience. Or I will not be able to have my experience. So
Recording in progress.
There are at least some conscious states which cannot be directed at or about something. These conscious states do not represent something outside of consciousness itself. So this interpretation of consciousness, or this account of consciousness,
Recording stopped.
holds that the phenomenal or the subjective property or the intrinsic quality of a conscious state is the most important or dominating feature of conscious state. And a state which has this phenomenal feature is called the phenomenal state. And mental states, which are phenomenally conscious states, are said to be internally or intrinsically conscious states. As we know, there is always a subjective inner perspective attached with our experiences. Otherwise, experience will not be my experience. Experience will not be your experience. In fact, this subjectivity or the first person perspective makes our conscious states phenomenal. The subjective inner perspective, which is attached to our phenomenal state, phenomenal experiences, is also called, very famously known as qualia, the qualitative property of experience. And following Thomas Nagel, we can call it what it is like states. So it follows from this phrase that there is something it is like to possess or to bear a phenomenal conscious state. For example, to taste pickle, to smell rose, to feel nervousness, etc. So what it is like for a subject to have various experiences or to become a subject of various experiences can be referred to as the phenomenal consciousness. Philosophers have identified, different kinds of phenomenal states. Philosophers have referred to different, varieties of phenomenal conscious states or phenomenally conscious states. When we talk about phenomenal consciousness, when we talk about the qualitative character of consciousness, there are two things involved here. We need to take into consideration the phenomenal character of being an experiencing subject and the phenomenal character of various experiences she has. And these two aspects are very much closely related to each other. As we know, an experience without being the experience of a particular subject cannot be called phenomenal. An experience in relation to its subject, who is the bearer of the experience, becomes phenomenal. So philosophers have identified different kinds of phenomenal conscious states or experiences, out of which, perceptual experiences like seeing green, hearing music, touching ice, these are very significant. Many of the times we discuss about examples from our perceptual experiences or visual experiences. And we can say in this context that the hard problem of consciousness arises, as famous philosopher David Chalmers says, calls it the hard problem of consciousness. It arises due to the irreducibility of the phenomenal and the subjective properties of consciousness. It arises due to the problem of reducing phenomenal to physical or natural properties of our experience. So the phenomenal consciousness, has also been understood in two different but closely related ways. By, as I said, by referring to the subjects and their conscious experience. There is something it is like to be a subject who is having different experiences. There is also something like to have a particular experience with its own phenomenological richness. There is qualitative feature of every experience that we have in our day-to-day life. In spite of the subject or experiencer being the same in various experiences, each experience comes with its own distinctive phenomenological character. The relationship between an experience and the subject of that experience is the subject matter of various philosophical discourses or various scientific discourses. The relevant question that arises in this context is how the experience of a subject is given to the subject who is having that experience. That's a very difficult question to answer. How my experience is given to myself. As we know, as I have already discussed or referred to, that this phenomenal consciousness, the qualitative character of consciousness, is associated with our subjectivity. But we know that in the background, in contemporary philosophy, we see that many philosophers are critiques of Descartes' dualism, and a lot of the discussions on subjectivity that we have in contemporary discourse, we have actually inherited the notion of subjectivity from Descartes' description of mind, or Descartes, the way René Descartes explained the nature of mind, the way he described the nature of mind. As we all know that, Descartes made a radical distinction between mind and body. According to him, there are two different substances. Mind is non-physical and non-extended, where body is physical and extended in space. Another very important point of the distinction between mind and body is that mind is subjective, whereas body is objectively there. Though one can say that we have inherited the notion of subjectivity from Descartes' work, but I would like to argue that the subjectivity is not all about the Cartesian subjectivity. Subjectivity is not about, having an inner space. If we look at other philosophical traditions, we find that the very notion of subjectivity is the situated subjectivity. If we refer to Martin Heidegger's work in his famous book, Being and Time, he describes the notion of being in the world. We need to understand subjectivity in relation to being in the world. Let me come back to the phenomenal consciousness. As I was trying to mention that this phenomenal consciousness is difficult to define. The moment we try to, define or we try to capture the essence of phenomenal consciousness, it always escapes the network of our cognitive ability. And we end up in giving a circular definition. Ned Block, a very famous philosopher in contemporary philosophy, he says this about phenomenal consciousness. I quote, he says, "Let me acknowledge at the outset that I cannot define P consciousness in any remotely non-circular way. I do not consider this an embarrassment. The history of reductive definitions in philosophy should lead one not to expect a reductive definition of anything. But the best one can do for P consciousness is in some respects worse than many other things, because really all one can do is point to the phenomenon. Nonetheless, it is important to point properly." As I said, there are various instances of phenomenal consciousness, like perceptual experiences, bodily sensations, emotions, nervousness, moods like depression and tension, etc. These are different experiences. We call them phenomenal experiences. Now I am going to discuss the specific argument which is famously known as the knowledge argument against physicalism. And as you know, Frank Jackson, in his paper Epiphenomenalism, and later on in another paper, What Mary Didn't Know, in two of his papers, he discussed about this knowledge argument, and thereafter many philosophers have responded to, and this knowledge argument has been a point of discussion, a major point of discussion among philosophers. Okay, so Jackson's knowledge argument is against physicalism in the context of consciousness. Jackson starts his discussion by attacking the basic assumption of physicalism. How he defined physicalism? He says, physicalism is not the non-controversial thesis that the actual world is largely physical, but the challenging thesis that it is entirely physical. And this is why physicalists must hold that complete physical knowledge is complete knowledge. So what is the point here? If we admit that physical knowledge of the world is the complete knowledge of the world, then we can deduce from this proposition that complete physical knowledge of consciousness must be the complete knowledge of consciousness. In order to discuss Jackson's knowledge argument, let us take into consideration the case of Mary. This is a very famous thought experiment which Frank Jackson tried to discuss in his papers. Mary is the name of a girl who is a physicist and neurologist in broad sense of the physics. She has theoretical knowledge about all the physical factors in our world. However, the problem is that throughout her life, she has always been restricted to a black and white room. She has seen black and white television. She has read black and white books and newspapers. Also, all her equipments in her laboratory are black and white. She has experienced only these two colors in her life. She has never encountered any other color like the color red. As a physicist, she knows, as a physical scientist, she knows that there are different colors available in the color spectrum. I mean, she also has all the physical and theoretical knowledge about the color red, even while she is in black and white room. She knows, for example, the surface of red object, the way they reflect light, and the way it leads to subsequent changes in the retina, or what happens in optic nerve or visual cortex. She has, being a competent physical scientist, she has the knowledge of all this. So one can say that she has the exhaustive knowledge of the color vision, hypothetically speaking, because this is a thought experiment. But she does not have the knowledge of what it would be like to experience something red. Mary does have, the knowledge of what it is like to see black and white. As I have, stated earlier, what it is to experience something black would be different from what it is like to experience red or to see a red object. So the instinctive feelings attached with the experience of black and experience of red are different and unique. The qualitative aspects of experiencing red, experience black are different. One day, Mary is released from her black and white room. Now Mary is roaming around in the market, in the vegetable market, and she sees red tomato for the first time. Here the question arises, what about her physical knowledge of red? Will it be enriched? Will Mary's physical knowledge while she was in black and white room be increased? Will it be, will that knowledge be enriched by the experiential domain or the phenomenological domain of experiencing red which Mary is encountering, now. That is the question for, physical scientists. That is also the question for philosophers. If we look at physicalism, it would claim that the knowledge that Mary has about colors while living in black and white room is complete knowledge about the world. But in case of Mary, it seems obvious that she does not know all there is to know about the facts of the world. She does not know even what it is like for others to see red, what it must be like for others to see, green. So she was lacking the knowledge. She was lacking some knowledge of other minds. When she is released from black and white room and experiences a color television, she will come to know what it is like to experience other colors. She would be able to distinguish between the phenomenal character of color experience and the physical properties and objective properties of color. She would come to realize that her knowledge of the world, her knowledge of other minds has developed, and it has been enriched after her release. And that's why the physical knowledge that she had while she was in black and white room, even being a competent physical scientist, her physical knowledge was incomplete, inadequate, and ineffective. So, if complete physical knowledge is the complete knowledge, then physical, as I said, physical knowledge of consciousness must be the complete knowledge of consciousness. But Jackson argues that this is not plausible. Here the physicalism is wrong. Physicalism simply is not able to capture the phenomenological domain of experiencing a red object. We can try to formulate the argument, the knowledge argument, in the propositional form, in the form of premises and conclusion. The first proposition, or the first premise: Mary knows everything physical there is to know about other people. The second premise: Mary does not know everything there is to know about other people and herself, because she learns after her release. Therefore, conclusion: there are truths about other people and truths about herself which escape the physicalist story, which escape physicalism or physical knowledge. There is another form of argument, and which is very interesting. This argument, this knowledge argument, can be formulated through a priori reasoning, through the concept of a priori reasoning. What is that? Let us try to understand. Let us take P as the totality of physical truths. P stands for the totality of physical truths, and Q stands for the phenomenal truth. Here, how we can formulate another version of the argument, keeping this in mind. The first proposition: Mary in her room knows that P. That means Mary has the totality of physical truths. And she is an ideal a priori reasoner. But still, she is not in a position to know that Q. Q stands here for phenomenal truth. Here is the second premise. If the first proposition is true, then Q does not follow a priori from P. If the first proposition is true, then phenomenal truths are not reducible from physical truths. Third proposition. If P implies Q is not a priori, then physicalism is false. That means if it is not necessary that phenomenal truths are physical truths, then physicalism is false. Physicalism is unable to capture the phenomenological domain, the experiential domain of our consciousness. Physicalism is not able to explain the subjective domain of our experience. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much, Dr. Panda. It's a wonderful talk, and your talk has opened up so many discussion points, so many points for discussion. So to discuss this talk, we have a wonderful team of panelists. We have very esteemed and wonderful philosopher and lady among us, Ananya Barwa Chaudhary. Dr. Ananya, please welcome, ma'am. And so kind of you that you have joined us. Dr. Ananya is Associate Professor in Hindu College, Delhi University. She is a wonderful lady. She is more than Associate Professor. And I welcome you, ma'am. Secondly, we have a very good philosopher, renowned philosopher, Rajiba Behra, sir, Dr. Behra. Please welcome Dr. Behra. He is Assistant Professor in Banaras Hindu University, Department of Philosophy and Religion. And our third panelist is Dr. Surbhi Unial from Hansraj College, Delhi University. Ma'am, please welcome. So I kindly invite you all to start a discussion. Ananya, ma'am, you may start. Yeah.
Okay, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So firstly, thank you, Dr. Dixit, for having us here. And I think this is truly a meaningful session for this is one of those rare occasions when all of us working in the area of philosophy of mind have assembled. So my heartiest felicitations to you for coming up with a theme as meaningful as this. And definitely, I'm delighted with the speaker, Dr. Panda, and the co-panelists, of course, Dr. Unial and Dr. Behera. Thank you all for being a part today. So, as much as I have all the appreciation for Dr. Panda's presentation, and I was keenly glued to what he had been presenting on, I definitely wholeheartedly go by what his positions have been. This, of course, has also been a theme of my interest. Having said this, there are certain pointers which I would like to address on, and maybe we can further continue our discussion from here. So my focal point here is, of course, about qualia or quail, or the subjective experiential feel. And a quotation which I had read many moons back, I just thought I would read it out today. I'm quoting. It is from a passage from Jolly and Watkins. And they quote it here as, the thought of qualia is difficult to express, but apparently easy to hold. It is not simply that any scientific account of the mind or the brain will necessarily leave something out. The thought rather is that we can never capture propositionally, scientifically, or otherwise the richness or kind of information presented by experience. What exactly can we not capture propositionally? Well, that is also difficult to capture. Necessarily leave some. Okay. Words cannot adequately express a problem concerning a purported feature of experience that words cannot adequately describe. The qualia problem itself is then a qualia problem. So this quotation, and I remember understanding or gauging at this difficulty during my PhD days, long time back. So, this is one passage that has always stayed with me. And as and when we are mainly discussing about Mary in our knowledge argument, there are certain pointers of qualia that have definitely come up, which is, of course, as we understand, is ineffable, it is intrinsic, it is private, and it is definitely directly apprehensible in consciousness. However, I was just trying to figure it out because I did see Dr. Panda was getting disturbed with the background noises, recording on, recording off, recording in process. And my mind was telling me that, well, this is precisely what qualia is. There cannot be any such recording in process, recording on, or recording disturbed. I wish there was, but no, it is not. Because it is not graspable, because it is not recordable, we just do not know how qualia exists or when qualia will exist. I mean, the similar setting, the similar environment, the similar set of people, that experiential feel of maybe tasting the pickle might have triggered at some point. It may not trigger in similar points too, because qualia is that slippery. And that, I think, is the beauty of Mary Jackson's knowledge argument, where she roams around the vegetable garden, I think, or vegetable market, I think that's what Dr. Panda had said, and sees the red tomatoes. And she, being an established and erudite scholar, a scientist, she shouldn't have really taken a back seat or been awestruck seeing the red tomato. But the minute she holds the red tomato and she's like, "Ooh, wow." Now that wow is precisely the defining moment when she transcends from her scientific identity to the phenomenal consciousness state. So obviously, which Dr. Panda had very rightly addressed, that there was no reason for Mary to be awestruck. I mean, she had been dealing with this throughout her life. She knows the chemical properties of tomatoes. She knows how redness comes up. But the minute she is introduced to the red apple or the red tomato, she is awestruck. That experiential feel is where the votaries of phenomenal consciousness, this is where their richness lies. And this made me further think that just like when Mary, and it also reminded me of our COVID times when we were in some ways all Mary, cut off from the world in our own private domains, doing our online work. So the minute I remember, I am here mentioning about the qualia. I went to university after almost 2 years. That day, even the traffic jam, seemed beautiful. I had always been cursing the Delhi's traffic, but that day when I had moved out from my home after 2 years to university, I was like, wow. So experiential field, the qualia is such a slippery and yet richly loaded subjective field that we just do not know how it would activate, when it would come, and the minute we think, oh, it has arrived, it might just disappear. So it is mysterious. And this further, and I'm doing loud thinking here, made me think that perhaps this is how the cavemen in Plato's Republic, the minute they are out, this particular prisoner, just to quickly narrate a little bit about the Plato's caveman theory for the unversed. For Plato, the world that we live in is just a pale imitation of the perfect world that lies out there. And all of us are kind of a caveman, where we are inside the cave, this fire perennially always being lit outside the threshold of the cave, and our face is towards the wall of the cave. So whatever we are seeing is just a shadow. The birds, the shadow being cast on the wall, the trees, the shadow being cast on the wall. And that's what our reality has always been. The shadows are our reality. And then one of the cavemen finally releases himself, just like Mary releases herself. The caveman releases himself and goes out. The minute he crosses the threshold, he is startled. He isn't really in a position to see the brightness of the sun rays. For all this while, he was in darkness. And he very gently, very gracefully tries to see the shadow, because shadow was his world. Shadow was his reality throughout his life. He grasps the shadow of the bird or the particular tree. And then slowly, once his eyes gets used to the shadow, he looks at the object in itself, the object, the tree. And then finally, when his eyes are used to the objects, he then wonders that where is this light coming from? And then he notices, that's the sun rays, that's the sun. So the sun is the ultimatum, and I need to go back. It is a eureka moment for me. It was his phenomenal consciousness coming out, and he's all pumped up, and he's like, I need to go back, and I need to tell my fellow prisoners in the cave that, hey, the world that you're living in is just a empirical world. Scientifically, maybe for you and me it is sorted, but there is this other world. But what happens when he goes back? Is he given a red carpet welcome? No, not at all. Everyone takes his opinion or belief with a pinch of salt, and they have a difficulty that what moronic conversation? Can't you see this world is the real world? And that somehow made me realize that, yes, as Dr. Panda was very rightly stating about the Cartesian dualism of mind-body split, started by René Descartes, and of course with Heidegger's being in the world, the dialogue. This tension or this gap was there right from the Greek philosophy period itself. This is where I thought, and it just came to me when I was listening to Dr. Panda, and that moment when we just slip from our domain of everything being hands-proofed, everything being DAS-proofed, and we go beyond the hands-proving, and the DAS-proving is the domain we enter into a subjective, experiential field. So the beauty, or rather the mystery of the experiential subjective field is, as much as many a times the hard problem of consciousness can be really hard, can be really difficult, but the minute I feel that, I have kind of understood it, it just vanishes again. So it is like a slippery element which is there in all of us somewhere. But like, for example, if I can just give an example here, every time I see the Rajdhani train that departs from our New Delhi railway station to Guwahati, I'm reminded of my college days, and I think 36 times. I mean, we couldn't even think about traveling by flight when we were students. So Rajdhani train. And every time I see the Rajdhani train, yes, intentional. Yes, the train is out there. Yes, it is an object out there in the world. But for me, the Rajdhani train is just an extension of my emotions, nostalgia. So the phenomenal consciousness comes up. However, it is not always it comes up. Sometimes we are so caught up, we are in such a rush that I might see the Rajdhani train go past by me, but well, such emotions will just not occur or will just not be activated. So the problem of our as Dr. Panda had rightly said, the arguments against physicalism, the knowledge argument, Mary, the scientist Mary, I think the votaries of phenomenal consciousness would like to address her as an unenlightened Mary, for us. So this again brings us to the question of what is philosophy. Philosophy is love of wisdom. And if it is love of wisdom, we ought to be enlightened, the enlightened Buddha, enlightened, right? But with Mary, the knowledge argument, the enlightenment element is compromised, for she is not, she takes a while to go through the experiential field of redness. So these makes her unenlightened. And if she is unenlightened from that perspective, partially maybe she is, there is more for wisdom to chip in. So wisdom is not always intentional mental states, as maybe Michael Tai, or other philosophers would like to state, but it is also to do with both phenomenal and intentional, giving us to weak intentional state of mind, where there is a negotiation, where there is a barter system between two extremist positions. The extremist positions being everything being subjective, everything being experiential, to everything being objective, to everything being out there, to an intersubjective domain. And the minute it is a balanced approach, which perhaps even Aristotle in the form of golden mean, or Buddha in his Madhyamikarika have expressed, that maybe that is the way where we need to handshake, where we need to move beyond our stuck or stated positions. So, yeah, these were some of the thoughts that came to me when I was listening to Dr. Panda.
Yeah. Ma'am, I would like to invite Dr. Behra to join the session, to join this discussion, because it's very interesting. Dr. Behra, please join.
Yes, I am here. I am listening. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
Am I audible clearly?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yes, I'm listening attentively. Yes.
So, what do you say on this? Ma'am's remarks. What are your observations on Dr. Panda's talk?
Yes, I can say at the very outset, thank you so much, ma'am, and to the president of this CAPE, Philosophy CAPE, and director of this CAPE. And also very much thankful to the speaker, Dr. MANOJ Kumar Panda, who has chosen this very interesting topic. And my observation of this paper is that it is an episto-onto methodological inquiry of consciousness, which is reproduces and produces a kind of consciousness, call it phenomenon consciousness. And in other words, we can define it something differently like that. It's a phenomena mind and phenomena experience. Perhaps it is the case, and without consideration of physical truth. But moreover, Manoj Panda sir discusses about something which is the phenomena consciousness is not equivalent. It is sometimes equivalent to a distinct subjective feelings and also intrinsic non-relational property of the mental state. And that is also discussed by David Chalmers' perspectives, what is called qualia, and Ned Block also. Professor Ned Block also discussed about it. They are considered it is something. Phenomena consciousness is experience, which is not considered as the experience of the creature. It is not the experience of creature. Rather, it is a creative consciousness. We cannot say the creature consciousness. Rather, it is a creative consciousness. But it is questionable. It is not so clear. So they argue that phenomenon consciousness is about the higher level mental state. If it is the case, then how do we determine or how do we maintain the level, higher level? Or what is the ontological identity of the level of the mental state? This is my query I found. And problem concerning physicalism and psychism relation for formulation of knowledge. The human psyche play a master role, and which eliminate the physical aspect of evidence with the consideration of inadequate epistemic evidences. In this episto-methodological enterprise, the ontological entity, identity of the entity, which is the part and parcel of our phenomenal consciousness, that is determined through our mental representation of the entity. So now, with this consideration, the phenomenal consciousness is qualia. And for the pursuit of certain solution for the problem of qualia, David Chalmers suggested that perhaps we can think for common sense notion of cause, as well as we can say think about intentional content. And Dr. Panda also quoted the point of Franz Brentano and John Searle's notion of intentionality, where they found some sort of problems is there which is very difficult to correlate with phenomenal consciousness. But for Franz Brentano and John Searle, the ontological identity of intentional content is not necessarily intrinsic in nature. Yes, in this context, I can take the help of Ned Bloch's argument, who argues that if you understand phenomenal consciousness into two different ways, like functional consciousness as well as access consciousness, then there is possibility. There is possibility to claim that phenomenal consciousness is necessarily just a representation of mind, of mental state and experience. So in this way, you can find solutions. But I have another query, what Dr. Panda has emphasized on non-physicalism. So I can question, is there anything non-physical about the mind? Or if it is the case, then how did epistemology help to develop phenomenal consciousness? And then also, the further question is rising, can phenomenal consciousness give a reductive natural explanation? So these are the observations I found, but again, holding his view or holding his explanation about Frank Johnson's discussions or point regarding truth about consciousness. Truth about consciousness cannot be deduced from the complete physical world. So Frank Johnson argues that physical truth is not the whole truth. It is not the whole truth. So his argument goes against physicalism. It is right. It is Dr. Panda also pointed out very clearly. But the world is completely physical or material. That is a questionable, because in the lens of through the lens of phenomenal consciousness. So here knowledge claims about world is based on human consciousness, just human consciousness, which is something beyond the physical or beyond the mental world. So it is something questionable for me. So the account of consciousness is considered as phenomenal consciousness that is not equivalent to one's experience, or our experience only. But when we think about Cholchaland, Petrika Cholchaland, she is against David Chalmers' arguments, which is emphasized on just experience and qualia, something, and he has also articulated a problem that is called hard problem. Hard problem is something, he said, that which we already understood. But here conscious or hard problems of consciousness or conscious experience is a problem of semantics, not just about the epistemological problem. Rather, it is a semantical problem, I noticed. So here we can think about something. Daniel Dennett's point. Daniel Dennett, he started about the qualia. That is something queening qualia. So it is just the way things seem to us. It is also problematic for us because how pure subjective phenomena is the part and parcel, is the center of knowledge system or we can formulate knowledge on the basis of that only. So that I'm thinking a lot, and with the, holding the argument of Michael Tai, what Dr. Panda has stated about the phenomenon consciousness is, entails that our consciousness is based on phenomenal feeling. So phenomenal feeling, it is something anti-physicalistic approach. And when a person who experiences something, means the person is conscious being. Of course, yes, true. It's right. But the person gain knowledge through the process of phenomena feeling is not the case. It is something, I think, ridiculous in nature, or we are reductionistic in nature. We are reduced down to something our mind or the mental properties of human being. But what about the others? It's not sufficient. So that there is problem, there's complete knowledge. So I can give an example of evening star and morning star, the Hegelian perspectives. We found when we locate the two stars, but both denote to the same, a single entity, single physical entity, we can say. So that is Venus. But the concept play different conceptual rules. It's not something you can say the conceptual rules. It's not something here. No, just what is that called? That is called our consciousness or consciousness or rule of consciousness. Rather, it is going beyond that. So how do you grant that? How do you grant that the concept plays different? So how do you grant that? It's just phenomenal consciousness, which is not about physical truth. It's doubtful. So question rises like, is it an epistemological gap, or it is a metaphysical gap, or it is a semantic gap? So it's my query I found. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you
Dr.
so
Behra.
much, Ripa ma'am.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, sir. I cordially request Dr. Unial to share her views and observations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shipra. First of all, to invite me to speak in front of and honored, first of all, to speak in front of 3 of my seniors who are present here. One thing that I can observe in this whole discussion is that we are all discussing in the same line. And even I'm going to elaborate it a little further. And as Manoj sir and others have already discussed about how they...
Wait.
Sorry, there is some disturbance. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So as we have seen that how David Chalmers has talked about the hard problem of consciousness, which has been discussed by the other speakers as well. I'm going to just elaborate onto that point and discuss one of the important idea or a thought experiment which was proposed by David Chalmers, and which I think is going to take this discussion a little bit more further, which is about the philosophical zombies. So David Chalmers, he has conceptualized this idea of philosophical zombies, who are in fact the hypothetical beings, and these hypothetical beings are indistinguishable from ordinary humans in terms of their behavior, in terms of their responses, and their overall functionality. But crucially, they lack conscious experience. So something, in one sense, we can say that they are to some level just like us, but on the other hand, they are distinguished from us from lacking this conscious experience. So in other words, they are beings that exhibit all outward sign of consciousness, like that of the behavior or engaging in conversation, just like how we are engaging in a conversation here, or expressing emotions and performing engaging or complex tasks. But according to the thought experiment, they do not possess subjective first-person experience. And I think this idea of the first-person experience is something that we can discuss it here a little bit further when we're talking about consciousness to be subjective. Because this first-person perspective is something which is lacking in these zombies, though they could look like us in other acts which look outwardly to be conscious, yet they do not possess this so-called subjective and first-person experience. So, for example, let's say, imagine a situation where there's a world just like that of ours, and with people who look, who act, who behave just like us. They engage in conversations, they solve problems, they express emotions, carry out daily activities in a way that is indistinguishable from conscious human beings like us. However, according to the thought experiment, these beings are called philosophical zombies because they lack internal first-person experiences. So they do not have subjective feelings, perceptions, or awareness and the first-person perspective, so to say. So Chalmers have given various arguments. I can elaborate it. I don't have that much time, but in very brief, he has given certain arguments like conceivability argument, where he's saying that we can conceive of a world like this, where that is behaviorally and physically identical to ours, but lacks consciousness. So if we can conceive of such a scenario without contradiction, it suggests that consciousness might not be solely dependent on physical properties. So the idea is that it is logically possible to imagine such a scenario, a world with the philosophical zombies. It raises a question about the relationship between physical processes and the consciousness, which we have been discussing in this by the various speakers. Then he's talking about epistemic possibility versus metaphysical possibility. So epistemic possibility would be like what we can know or conceive, and metaphysical possibility would be like what is possible in reality. So he is acknowledging that in a metaphysical sense, like what the reality actually is, the existence of philosophical zombies might be controversial. But from the epistemic possibility, the zombies is sufficient to make his point, because we can conceive in the epistemic sense that such kind of zombies can exist without contradiction or without challenge to what his hypothesis, and this zombies can in fact pose a challenge to the physicalism alone. Then while arguing it a little bit further, I would like to ask or raise this question to the platform, and maybe anyone who is interested can respond to it, that on the one hand, we are talking about consciousness, but I feel that we need to make a distinction between even consciousness and mind. Because though many of the philosophers have taken it interchangeably, like if we are talking about René Descartes, he uses the term mind and consciousness to be synonymous. So the qualities, or you can say the attributes that he is ascribing to mind are synonymous to consciousness or soul. While the other philosophers might not take mind and consciousness to be synonymous. And we have seen it from the Western perspective as well as from the theories in Indian philosophy as well, where they have made this distinction between consciousness and mind. So here also I feel a need to distinguish, maybe to distinguish between mind and consciousness, because as one of the contemporary theories that, in fact, I did my PhD on, which is on the extended mind hypothesis, according to that, it it argues that the mind can extend to the physical world and include or incorporate various artifacts, while the consciousness is something which always remains to be internal. So consciousness can never extend outside, while the mind can extend outside, because mind is described in a functionalist aspect. So the functions can be extended outside, while the consciousness, which is the first person perspective, is something which is very internal. So it cannot really extend into the external world. And we have seen various theories from the Indian perspective also, that how they make a distinction between mind and consciousness. So this is the question that I would like to raise here, and maybe we can then elaborate or discuss it further. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Unian. And meanwhile, I would like to invite our Honorable President, Sir, Professor Balram Singh, Sir, who is among us here, to give his observation and give a word on our cafe today. So please welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so sorry I was not able to join all the time, but I was able to listen most of the time from the very beginning. And what a wonderful feeling to have, having 4 young philosophers talking about something that is in some sense controversial, in the other sense very relevant. Controversial in the sense of talking about consciousness and physicality is something that has been debated for a very long time. And even I could see all these philosophers having their own perspective. So I'm just going to make my own perspective rather than commenting on something that I don't know that much. My perspective is, one experiment was done in 2006 on consciousness, subconsciousness. Consciousness, there they mean really mind. Subconsciousness, they mean what you call here consciousness. What they did experiment in which they had subjects think about buying a car, and they had 4 features to choose from. They had 4 features to consider. When they had 4 features to consider, they used their consciousness. Consciously, they were making decisions, which means they were using their mind to make the decision about something physical, because they were looking at, for example, they know what color it is, what kind of seats it has, what kind of horn it has, things like that. But then they had another group of people. They gave them 12 features, and when they gave them 12 features, this all became gut feeling. They didn't consider anything logically. They just felt, well, I like this one, that kind of thing. So I think what we consider, this is just my opinion, and I know we don't probably have time to debate it, but listening to them and knowing what I know a little bit, and teaching for 15 years chemistry of the mind and delving into some of these issues, I feel it is a perspective when things become too big. There's the discussion about the dark, and some young lady who was kept in dark for some long time, and then she was allowed to go out and she saw tomatoes, red color tomato. Of course, red color will be red color because that's just someone who had never seen one. It was very similar to me when I didn't know what is a strawberry when I came to America. So I didn't eat a strawberry for a long time because I didn't think that was a fruit. So I always only fruits I ate was the one I knew were the fruits, and the mangoes not being there, so I was eating only grapes and things of that nature, and apple. So because they didn't exist to me, even though I saw that, that looks like it is in the fruit category, but it didn't make sense to me. So what I'm trying to say here is that it is a physical, but when we call it conscious in your terms, subconscious in my term, it is really when it goes beyond. Maybe you have certain level of analytical power, in our mind and that just makes sense to us to express it, then we say it that way. We are playing with the physicality. After that, it becomes like whatever, that I like this and I like that, which is a very subconscious feeling. But I don't think it's beyond physicality. It is beyond physicality because we cannot grasp it. It is still a physical, and the physical tells that it is too large a thing, which then our mind says, okay, whatever. You might call it gut feeling, you might call just your consciousness or subconsciousness what is telling. But I think this is a very good debate, especially in KSAS sense of process that we are trying to do in terms of research and teaching. This is a very important aspect. The last point I would like to say, in physics also, there is interestingly a dark matter, we don't know what it is. But we don't say that, well, it is just a consciousness. We say that we know what it is not. What it is not is what we know. It is not that one, it's something else. And that gives very different kind of feeling. So it allows us to pursue, for those of us who have tenacity to do that. And I don't find anybody more tenacious than philosophers. So congratulations to all of you. You are very tenacious. You argue for nothing for a long time. And we sometimes get something out of it. And sometimes we just think, well, we'll just continue doing this. And so we hope that we continue interacting with you all. And hopefully we all will eventually make some sense, some better sense at least. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. So,
thank you so much, sir. Yes.
Yeah, I would request Dr. Panda to give his comments over, or answer or response over all these comments and feedbacks.
Just a second.
Yeah, I think we have to organize one more episode of this, part 2. Because this discussion is, it's seeming so interesting.
Why only part 2? we should be organizing this forever and take it into next life. And I will arrange it when I'm born again. I will arrange you guys to do it again.
Sure, sir. So please, Dr. Panda.
Okay. So I thank all the panelists for their very meaningful comments. Professor, I also express my gratitude to Professor Singh for listening to our discussion and for giving us this opportunity to reflect on consciousness. And his presence here is very inspiring for all of us. About the comments, Dr. Borua, as she rightly suggested, she is my senior in JNU, and she is an expert in this field. She also wrote her PhD thesis on phenomenal and intentional distinction. I remember our long discussion in front of Lohit Hostel. I agree with all her comments, and specifically, as she emphasized on the intersubjective domain. In order to understand consciousness, particularly the qualitative aspect of consciousness, there is a need to go back to to understand the intersubjective domain. And we all most of the time we try to make an uncompromising distinction between subjective on the one hand, objective on the one hand. It is as if there is only my mind and the world, the rest of the world. There are other minds. There are our feelings, our emotions, our ways of experiencing the world are always determined by others. As Merleau-Ponty suggests that the subject is nothing but the project of the world, and the world is nothing but what the subjects project. So this can be understood, as Dr. Borua rightly suggested, if we take seriously into account the intersubjective domain. About, I am not going into, responding all the details, all the comments about Dr. Behera's comments. I agree with all his, points that he has discussed. And, the problem of consciousness would be a problem of semantics. Okay. Some people, one of my students in my class, he says that it is nothing but a language game. We are playing with language to, to create philosophical problems. Okay. It's the play of language, and that is one, that is, there is a, very significant discourse surrounding this language game. We all know, particularly, Wittgenstein started the discussion, but then in continental philosophy, the way this language game has figured in is very significant. Okay. One question which Dr. Behera was trying to ask, one issue which he was trying to problematize in his comments is that is there anything non-physical about the world? Okay. And this comment is also very similar to the comment made by Professor Singh, respected Professor Singh, that it is not beyond physicality, and maybe consciousness is not beyond physicality, but beyond the physical space. It is physical, but we have not been able to understand sufficiently why at all are we conscious. It is physical, but we have not been able to understand why at all from physical realm consciousness arises. As I am reminded of Hoffman in his book. The name of the book I'm forgetting. The Case Against Reality. That is the name of the book. The Case Against the Reality. He suggests that the monkeys cannot do calculus, and dogs cannot read books. Why do we think that Homo sapiens can solve the mystery of consciousness? Maybe it is so far, if we say it is a cognitive inability on our part to understand consciousness. But as Nagel and others, Thomas Nagel and others suggested, that there is a need of scientific revolution, or conceptual revolution. After that, we will not be able to say, or depending on that scientific revolution, we will not be able to say consciousness is non-physical or consciousness is beyond the physical realm. I sincerely thank Professor Singh for this comment that he has made. About Dr. Unil's question, I really, appreciate the way she has tried to relate the problem that we have been discussing, particularly about the problem of explaining phenomenal consciousness, the way she has tried to connect that problem with the hard problem of consciousness, and particularly with the conceivability argument. Okay, I mean, the knowledge argument which Frank Jackson has discussed in his papers is primarily about the epistemological gap. Okay, but one might say that epistemological gap between physical truths and phenomenal truths. Okay, knowing physical truth might not suffice. Knowing phenomenal truths, knowing physical facts of the world might not lead us to know phenomenal facts about the world, about other minds, about our own experiences, about ourselves. Okay? And in the case of conceivability argument, as she has very rightly pointed out, we are primarily concerned with the ontological gap. Okay, if a zombie is possible without consciousness, I mean, the very notion of philosophical zombie is a molecule for molecule identical being minus consciousness. Okay, I mean, she can do everything that the original being can do, but she does not have that felt aspect, to her experience. I mean, it's like, as if, someone is having ice cream, but does not feel anything about it. She is, doing all the things. Her brain is also processing all the information that she's getting from, that particular. We cannot also call it experience, because it is not an experience, because there is lack of this felt aspect, the first personal, givenness. And so one might suggest that this epistemic gap between physical truths and phenomenal truths is not there, or will not be there, unless there is an ontological gap. So the knowledge argument, one can say, is something which stems from the ontological gap between physical and the phenomenal, the ontological gap between phenomenological domain and the realm of the physical, or the realm of causal and scientific laws. I thank all our panelists for their very meaningful suggestions, comments, questions. I also express again my sincere gratitude to Professor Singh for giving us this opportunity. I thank my junior and friend, Dr. Sipra, for inviting me and inviting me to Philosophical Cafe. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And thank you, all of you. I can only add one line, that we can keep this discussion going on with the argument of brain in vat argument. There is an argument of disembodied mind, which we can, relate with your argument. But we are lacking time, so we'll organize some other day. maybe Ananya ma'am can, give a talk on this to relate brain in vat argument and this physicalism of mind. So thank you all of you. And I cordially invite my colleague, Dr. Aparna Dheer, to give vote of thanks. Please. Yeah.
Namaste, everyone. Firstly, I'm sincerely paying my gratitude towards the KSAS, that is the part of our INADS only, to think about and organize such program like Philosophy Cafe, because people like me, who is not at all a student of philosophy, not even understood a word about philosophy, but still we are getting here too much to learn and knowing new terms up from the philosophy, that is consciousness and other mind and other things. So these terms are new to us, but thank you for this organizing this. And for the welcome address, I would like to express my thanks to our director of KSAS, Dr. Raj Kumarji, for being here at that time. And now it's time to convey my thanks to the key speaker of today's talk, that is on the major theme, that is the phenomenal consciousness and the knowledge argument engaged physicalism. Dr. Manoj Kumar Panda ji, he's assistant professor from Precedency University, Kolkata, and we are very thankful to him for this very informative talk of today. Also, the panelists among us were Dr. Ananya Bodaya ji from Hindu College, Delhi University, Dr. Rajiva Lojan Behra ji from Banaras Hindu University, and Dr. Surbhi Unyal ji from Hansraj College, Delhi University. We are thankful to all our distinguished panelists of today for this enlightening discussion among among us. And then also I'm thankful to our Honorable President of INADS for being here and sharing his observations with us on this topic, and also the talk given by all the panelists and the key speaker. And lastly, our moderator, Dr. Shipraji, for taking all the effort of organizing this program, and also this program is going live on YouTube. So for that, I am thankful to Avinash Tiwari ji of KSAS, and also the other faculty members of KSAS and INADS. Thank you very much all.
Thank you so much, Aparna ji. Thank you so much. And thank you all of you. Thank you all the viewers, all the listeners, and all my dear and esteemed philosophers and professors. Be with us and see you soon in the next talk on 16th January. The next talk will be by Dr. Ramesh Chandar, again from JNU. So please be there. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shipraj. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.